And hello boys and girls and fellow adventurers. Thank you for tuning in today. As promised, I said I would do a full playthrough of Adventure Awaits. So let's have a go and see how it all flows out in front of you. So we've set up the board and we're going to do a simple adventure of a barbarian and a dwarf, and together they are teaming up to help the local villagers because there's been raiding parties of goblins and orcs in the area, and a few people have been kidnapped, and the local farmer's daughter has been dragged off, and she is being held in a bit of a cell somewhere in an old dungeon nearby. Now, before the video started, I shuffled all the cards, and the only cards we took out was a few from the threat deck, which were monsters, which are like skeletons and zombies, which were not really part of the story, which I've just created for today's dice rolling. And the actual dungeon deck itself, in the back part, in the B section, which is at the lower part of the dungeon, we've put the guard room and the prison cells where the couple of prisoners and the farmer's daughter is being held. So that was the only requirements today for this made up scenario. So you're not going to find her at the very beginning, she's going to be at the further part of the dungeon. And then finally we just have to get to the boss battle at the end, which will be a few more difficult goblins or orcs to fight. And it's just a simple playthrough of that. And then afterwards we will edit this and add the travelling back to a settlement. You can have a look at the travelling phase, and then something that I really enjoy is the actual what goes on when you get to a settlement. I have set up two heroes right now. We have the barbarian and his tokens, and we have the dwarf and his tokens. And the dwarf at the top of the board in the right hand side you see there is going to be the party leader. So he starts off with the first player token, which we're using this coin, and I'm just going to drop it on the edge of his card. And as well as the tokens, we have got a sword and dagger for the barbarian. He's got some bandages and bits under that. And then the dwarf has got armor and a shield. He's got a hammer, and he's got some bandages as well, which is kind of a starting items for level 1 characters. What you see here is what we've designed, and artist and everything I'm really happy with. We are obviously using something which I haven't designed yet for the first player token, and obviously these are just simple punch out to test rules. Obviously they're to change and will become really good, nice looking tokens. So we've got a little sheet of paper to my left with the latest rules for various things like diseases and poisons and falling over. So let's, with no further ado, your time is precious, and let's give this a go. I hope the lighting is fine because of the light of the day today, but hopefully we'll only find out when we see this on your computer screen or a big screen on your telly. So let's sit down and start rolling some dice. So our heroes are ready to adventure, and here we go. The first card of our dungeon when we're entering is the entrance. We have found it. Standing before you is the entrance you've been seeking. Weapons ready, it's time to enter. So the dwarf pushes aside all the brushwork and old dead twigs, and they find the entrance to this dungeon. Now, as we go through this video, it will take longer if I explain every single rule. So I will mention a few as we go along, but I'm kind of pretending that I'm talking to myself, or maybe people in front of me around a table, and you can just tune in and see how you like what you see. So let's get on with this, shall we? So we've now entered our dungeon. We are now at a T-junction. Before you stand two different directions. You cast your light down both. We have to make a choice. Well, we do have a torch with the barbarian, but the good news is the dwarf actually has vision that allows him to negate light. So we can see quite clearly down both sides. So we're going to have to roll a event and a danger die, and then afterwards there's a special rule that says which way. So let's take these 2 dice first and see what happens. We have a threat and we have a reward. Right. So the person or the hero who has the first player token will choose, do you want the threat first, which is going to be a fight already, or do we take the reward? Well, let's all go with the reward, shall we? So let's take the reward first. What do we have here? A pile of items lay in the corner of this T-junction. Stepping up, you look down. Let's see what we find. It says here, roll d6 twice. Let's roll these. Double 5s. Okay, we have found 2 poison cures. So for some reason, at this T-junction, perhaps there's a deader adventurer, maybe one of the farmers that were dragged off. Maybe the daughter was collecting herbs at the time. But for some reason, we have found 2 poison cures, which is very good if you're fighting spiders or any creatures that have that. So I'll put those to one side. And now we have to take on the threat. So before we choose which way we're going to go, we have crashed into returning orcs from a raiding party. Kill the humans, they say, and we must fight. This is a level 1 dungeon, and it is 2 orcs per hero. There is 2 heroes, so that is 4 orcs. I need to grab the orc card now. Like so. There's the orc card, and there's going to be 4 orcs. And there they are. Once again, we're using these tokens until ones are designed. M stands for it's a melee creature, and R is ranged. So obviously these are guys that are going to charge in and fight us. So how are we going to do this? Well, let's look at the T-junction. It says here that 4 heroes can fight 4 monsters, and 2 can use ranged, and the enemy can use 2 against you. So right now, all 4 orcs are going to come piling in down one of these sides of a T-junction and fight our heroes. So I think the best thing to do is to give 2 monsters to the barbarian, and we are going to give 2 monsters to the dwarf. When it comes to spreading these out, it is the person with the first player token. So the dwarf could take on all 4 if he wanted to, well, there we go, a bit crazy. So let's do an equal spread. So we've just entered the entrance, we've pushed aside the brush and the bushes and dead trees, we've entered, and suddenly at the T-junction we had some joy in finding some healing potions for poison, and then suddenly orcs have now attacked us. So let's get on with the fight. Well, let's just start with the dwarf, shall we, because he's the first guy. So for him, his fighting ability is a D8. And we will be using purple for our heroes today. And the monsters will be the grey colour, which you might just see on the edge of screen. So orcs normally have a D6 fight. Because each hero is outnumbered, at the moment that will be increased to a D8. And the lowest that they can roll is 2, because there's 2 each. So the dwarf is now going to face off. Highest wins. On a draw, things may happen. Right. The dwarf gets a 2 and the orcs get an 8. That is absolutely awful. Now we do have a fight 3 token, which means we can cash that in if you roll a 1 to a 3. We have a 2, we could cash this in, but we're never going to roll higher than an 8. So I'm afraid the orc somehow gets behind the dwarf and gives him a bit of a whack. So, damage time. The orcs are going to roll a D8 for damage. The dwarf's physical is a D8. But he also has armour, which is a D8. So it's the same die, but it does have a 3 for defence which means the lowest he can roll is a 3. And since the damage is equal or less to the actual armor, protection, or physical, it's a roll off. So again, if the orcs roll higher, damage is done. The 1 becomes a 3 because of protection, but this is higher, therefore tiddlywink time, and we take our first wound on the dwarf. So already not looking good. Over to the barbarian. He charges in because he has a special rule that says first fight round, if not ambushed, +1 dice level to fight and damage roll. His fighting is a D8, which is now increased to a D10, but because he's outnumbered, it will also be a D8 for the bad guys. So let's roll both together. Come on, charge in, help the dwarf. And it's a nightmare actually. He's rolled a 1 and they've rolled a 3. The good news is though, the sword can reroll 1 on a fight roll because it is a balanced weapon. So he gets an auto reroll. Praise the gods. And he rolls a 3 also. So when it comes to a fight, we need to give the heroes a bit of an edge, and therefore the fighting heroes will always win on a draw. If there's a special rule that says that, sometimes shields do, but in this regards, it is a clash and a standoff. So looking at this, there's nothing in front of me, and so that is the end of round 1. The dwarf got hit from behind, the barbarian charged in, and even his balanced sword could not help win the day. And so we now move on to combat round 2. For this combat, I will continue with explaining the dice rolls because it's our first round of combat. So let's go back to that poor dwarf. Again, combat starts picking up faster now. He's got a D8. They've got a D8. Dwarf hits an orc. Excellent. His hammer does D8 damage, which is the same die. And the orc's physical is a D8. It is a roll-off. But it says here, on a damage draw, the weapon will win because it's crushing bone. Let's go for it. 8 beats 5. Orcs have 1 wound, which means 1 orc actually dies. Just going to turn this card over. There's a rule of loot. Okay. So 1 orc has been killed. And we instantly roll now for experience. The experience is a 5+. So we just see if we can get a 5+. Yes, we do. So the dwarf actually gets an experience point for killing that orc, which is excellent. And now over to the barbarian. His charging has ended. He's rolling his normal D8 fight. And it will be a D8 for the orcs. And I'm afraid the orcs are doing a really good job at the moment. They've outnumbered him and he has taken a blow. He does have a fight 2 token. He can re-roll this. The question is, can he beat the 5? I'm going to say no. Let's just take the wound and see if he actually does take it as a token. So his physical is a D8. The damage is a D8. It is a roll-off. The barbarian's physical is higher than the actual damage. Therefore, he does not take a wound, and so we just call that a scar for terminology. So the barbarian takes a scar. So now we're on to fight phase 3. Let's go back to the wounded dwarf now. Again, he will roll a D8. He has only got 1 actual orc to fight. So he rolls his normal D6 for fighting. If he wanted to, the dwarf, being the first player, can choose if he wants to bring more into the fight. So he could have taken one of the monsters from the barbarian, and so he could have gone back into a bigger fight and been more outnumbered, and to help the barbarian out. But as you can see, the barbarian hasn't taken any wounds, the dwarf has. So it's going to be a bit more of an easier fight, fingers crossed. And 3 beats 2. Brilliant, that's all we need to know. And do we kill this orc by rolling higher on purple? No, we don't. So the orc takes a scar also. Over to the barbarian. He is outnumbered. And I'm afraid the orcs have an advantage always at the moment. It looks like we have been ambushed in a spectacular way and we are in trouble. But the good news is the barbarian takes a second scar. He's got scars to show off all those ladies at the old tavern later on, does he now? So the next fight combat, what shall we do? It's down to the dwarf. Again, 8 and 6. Right, so dwarf rolled a 3, orc rolled a 3. Normally it's a draw, but we have something called a shield, and it says here, on a fight draw, you win. So you not only block the blow, you turn that into an advantage, and that's the beauty about shields. You give up a hand to use a one-handed weapon, but with a shield though, in combat, on a draw, you win. So we block the orc's incoming blow, we lash out with our hammer, and now we see if we actually harm the orc. Come on now. And yes indeed, our blow kills the orc. Both of our monsters are now killed. We are now going to roll for 5+ experience, and we get a 6. On the back of the card it says loot, and that rule means on a 6 not only do you get 1 experience, this type of creature will generate 1 gold. So right now the dwarf, even though he's been wounded, is gaining experience. Once you get 10 experience, the dwarf will go from level 1 straight away to level 2, and he will get a bonus in the adventure itself. So now the dwarf is kind of relieved and staggered back, and there we go. So let's go over now to the barbarian and the end of this phase, and then we can see what happens if the dwarf wants to help out by pulling away an enemy for him to fight. The barbarian is not doing good today. An advantage. The barbarian blow hits. But alas, it is another scar on the orc. Green blood flows, and I'm afraid he's still struggling to fight his creatures. So this is now a good example. The combat round is over. Before we go into the next one, we can work out if anyone wants to help out in the combat, and the last person who has the say is in this matter. So the barbarian is not going to refuse the dwarf, who's the first player token, and he will give one of his creatures, the orc, over. So the dwarf can see that the barbarian at the T-junction is having a struggle, and now he is going to attack the orc. The orc spins round to fight the dwarf, and so now the fights are balanced. So let's start a new combat phase, and let's start with the dwarf. It is now heroes are rolling the purple D8, and because it's a single orc each, it is the grey D6. Highest fight wins. So here's the dwarf. The dwarf has failed, and we don't have a balanced weapon, and we do have a fight free token, which is kind of wasted on a 1. So we are going to let the orc swing and hit us, and the orc's damage is a D8, and I am rolling a D8 for my own protection, and the lowest is a 3. And a 7 on a 7. Excellent. So in this regards, the armour on the dwarf has stopped the blow from the orc. Good, good, good. Right, let's see what the barbarian's doing at the other side of the T-junction. Come on, barbarian. Excellent. the blow from the barbarian hits the orc. We have now rolled over 7, so this is our first heroic action card. Blow after blow. Roll 2 damage dice and apply both to target. So, let's just roll the creature's physical, which is a 2. So basically we roll this twice if need be. We don't need to be. Our orc has been hit and killed several times over. And now we roll for the experience, which is 5+. Ah, excellent. The barbarian deserves that. The fight round is over. We're into a new fight round now. The dwarf will not allow the barbarian to take his glory. So if the barbarian player wanted to take the character over and swap over, he will. But the dwarf, being dwarfs, will obviously say no. Allow me to continue this fight. I can handle it myself. And hey, another draw, which means the shield kicks in once again, and we are the ones doing damage. Come on. Alas, the cut across the orc's arm was not enough to put him out of combat. On to the next round of combat now. It's the dwarf again, going at it. Excellent. The dwarf has pulled off an heroic action, and it is a body slam. I'm going to hold this card to one side, because if the orc is still alive, there is a rule here. Hopefully the hammer does the work. Yes, and the actual 2 is higher than a 1, but we do find out that they do have a minimum toughness of a 3, which means I'm afraid the orc is still alive, but the target is stunned. So we should give him a knocked out token. We are on to a new round of combat. The barbarian watches on, and will he join in with the fight? And the dwarf will not allow it, and so the dwarf will continue. Next round of combat, the orc is picking himself up off the floor, but we have an advantage now because our fighting goes up to a D10, which is 1 level higher. So hopefully we can put an end to this orc. Thankfully we have a shield, because as the orc reaches out with his own weapon and swings wildly in front of us while picking himself up, we block the shield and our blow goes through. Let's just hope we can finish him off. Yes, indeed. Before the orc can fully get up, he's down for good. And experience, we don't get any experience for that. So now our first combat is over. And so we say to ourselves, wow. So the dwarf has taken 1 wound out of 3, 2 experience, found 1 gold. Barbarian is fine and has taken 1 wound. So before we move on to any special rules, which is which way, we can heal ourselves. And so the dwarf does have bandages. This card here says you may heal 1 wound. Goodbye wound. And roll a d6. On a 4, that was the last of your bandages. We did roll a 4, so whatever bandages we had left is now gone. So we used too much, maybe the wound was too great. Now, the Witch Ray Wall, what that means is you draw 2 cards, you choose which direction you want to go down, and then you bypass the other. So do we go down to the left and find another T-junction, or do we go to the right into the monster's lair? interesting. That takes a few more cards. That's going to fight monsters. On one side of danger is reward. But saying that though, we could take the event. So I think we're going to take this option. So we put this behind that. And we drop that on top of there. So we're going in one direction, not the next. But we're going to another T-junction. So this place is a bit of a maze. So we have to choose which one of these is triggered by us. Excellent. We have an event and we have the torch symbol. And the torch symbol is about passing this coin from one player to the next, which is here. So we will do the green one first. So now the Barbarian is the first player. And then we have a look to see what our event is. On the wall is a torch. Hooked onto the stone wall is a torch in his holder. I'll be taking that. Take a torch item. So excellent. Quite simple, actually. So let's have a look. Because we're at another T-junction, we do the same process again. Do we go one direction and find the torture chamber? Do we head in the other direction and take the corridor? I am going to take the corridor. So we head off down the corridor now. And we have an event. Childlike drawings. Goblin writing and more cover the walls. Parts show the dungeon layout. I wonder where they got this smelly brown paste from. This is a Wisdom 4+ test. Or if you have a Wisdom 1 token, you may pass automatically. If you pass, you gain a clue. So let's make a Wisdom 4+ test to see if we can understand what these writings on the wall mean. Now the Barbarian has a Wisdom of 4, D4, and the Wisdom of a Dwarf is a D6. So the Dwarf is going to see what he can do. And yes, he understands what's going on, and therefore we gain a clue. For us today, the clue is a white diddlywink. Let's keep going down this corridor. Hey, we come to another T-junction. At last the path splits two different ways. Which way shall we go? But before that happens, we find out that we have rolled an event and a threat. I think we're going to take the threat first. Ankle biters. Charging at you, this little group of pale little scale green creatures start to surround you. Watch your ankles. It says here, 3 biters per hero. So these are your little creatures like Gretchens and other little creatures like that. 3 biters per hero, my word. Here we go, top card. Of all the green skin types, the biters are the smallest of the bunch. Reaching to the height of your knees, these dumb crazy creatures are more of a pain than a threat. The main problem is the numbers when you're encountered as they swarm upon you and indeed upon you. And we do have a rule called Wave 1 and 2, so that's fine. And they're quite easy to kill. They have a general fighting of a D6. They have a physical of a D4. Because our weapons are much more powerful, we will negate the roll off. So they'd be kind of 1 hit, 1 kill creatures. And that's pretty it, really. They don't do much damage to us. And they are indeed more of a drain on our energy. And there is 6 of these creatures. There you go. And we are in a T-junction, which means only 4 of them can fight us. That's 2 left over. And we are going to do that. So the Dwarf takes 2, Barbarian takes 2, and 2 of these other creatures are waiting to charge in once there is an opportunity. Let's start with Barbarian. Barbarian charges in. His fighting is increased to a D10, and they will roll a d8 themselves because there's 2 of them. Come on, Barbarian, you can't let these little things defeat you. And there we go. Incredible. Thank you very much, Barbarian. Great hit. Deal 1 wound guaranteed. +1 to the experience roll if killed. Right, so we now know that it's a guaranteed wound. The creature's going to instantly die. The experience is a 6+. We know it's going to be a 5+ now. Yes! Brilliant. Thank you very much. Barbarian gets his 2nd experience point. Over to the dwarf. It will be an 8 versus 8. It is a draw. Shield wins. We don't need to roll a d8 damage because its physical is a d8. It's an automatic hit, automatic kill. They don't have any defense. There you go. His little creature's done. 6 on experience. No. Combat round is over. New combat round. Barbarian's going to roll an 8 versus a 6. Oh, we need a purple one, my dear fellow. And I'm afraid he has been hit by one of these little creatures. So over to damage. Well, luckily they only do a small damage, which is a d6, and the Barbarian's physical is a d8. And ooh, we take a wound. There we go. So there we have it. A little dagger goes in the back of our thigh as a little Gretchen creature is holding on and sticking it in with both of his hands. Right, round of combat. Let's go over now to a new one. It's going to be the dwarf, and that roll didn't turn out too well, did it now? Unknown, the creature has got behind the dwarf and lunges and attacks. 6 versus 8. We're going to take that awkward roll as a 1 and a 4. Perfectly fine. Combat round is over. We will go back to the beginning of the next one, and it'd be the Barbarian from the top, and he's going to roll an 8 versus 6. And whoa, I'm afraid once again the Gretchen creature has stabbed again with his little dagger. It's the same dice. 8 for our health, physical, 6 for his weapon, and thankfully the Barbarian, being super tough, just takes a scar. So come on, dwarf, what can you do? And there we go. Bit of a shame. We're still not going to use our token. We're going to keep that and let the creature roll for attack. Hopefully our defense of 3 lowest will give us a chance. And the good news is the 1 does become a 3, which is equaled, cancels out. So thankfully we had armor. If it wasn't for that, the dwarf would have taken a blow. New round of combat. Going back to the Barbarian. Yes, indeed. We get heroic action. A deep thrust. The target lowers his physical die. You can't get lower than a d4. So basically the sword goes right through that little creature, probably picks him up and flings him through the air. And we'll see if we can get an experience point on a 6. And we don't. And hopefully this is the end now of the fight, as the dwarf will attack his little creature. And yes, auto kill, job done. 6+ experience. Oh, so close. So another round of combat has been done, and we can see that the Barbarian has taken a wound. He has a bandage card. He will use this to remove the wound. 4+. Yes, I'm afraid the bandages are all used up. It looks like he's got 1 more left. And then at this we have to rewind. There we go. Let me give you that back. You probably said, Alan, these two guys, yay, they charge in as well. There we go. Spoke too soon. So let's start with the Barbarian then. Hopefully they die quickly. And yes, there we go. Boom. Experience, nope. Dwarf. Kills it. No experience. There we go. The last two creatures ran in thinking they'll make a difference. And I'm afraid to say they died pretty quickly. Now we use the bandage to remove that. And on 4+, we lose the card. And once again we do. So basically we done that. Good. That was his first bandage. Right, brilliant. So that was it, one left. Finally. We are now at the T-junction. We've been healed. I think this is the last T-junction in the deck. Do we go down the hallway where there might be monsters? Do we go down this passageway where we're going to be safe? Well, I think we want to be safe. So there we go. Let's go down this passageway. We have an event. It is caving. Oh my. The walls shake and the ceiling starts to come down. Damn, we're nearly blocked. So, can we dig through? So it is a D6. And on a 4+, we can get through. Okay, so let's make a single roll. Oh, no, we can't. We must turn back. Okay. So what we do now is we just swap those cards over, like so. And we go the other direction. We do obviously have to roll the threat. Damn, maybe that cave-in has caused some kind of... oh my word. We have been ambushed. So I'm not saying it was planned. Goblins. A band of vile goblins return from some wicked deed. Level 1, which is 2 goblins per hero. So there you have it, my friends. The cave-in has forced us to go the other way. And we are now fighting some goblins. The most common of the greenskins is the goblin. Standing about 4 feet tall with large head, with noses and ears the same. These twisted creatures love to cause trouble in raiding parties and warbands. They carry all sorts of cruel weapons and homemade armour hanging off their scrawny bodies. Dealing one is easy, but the problem is there's never just one. So there is a chance that there'll be more coming. On a 6, when it comes to experience, we will find a bit of gold on them, and their experience is 5+ when you kill them. 1 wound. They have a defense of 2, meaning that's the lowest they could possibly roll because of the bits and bobs on their bodies. They fight with a D6, and they have a physical of a D6. And their damage is a D8, which is a common damage. Let me put that on top of there as a reference. Right, and how many creatures was that? That was 4 goblins, okay. And so we have 4 goblins now. And this is in a hallway. And then the hallway says only 2 can fight. So that means 2 are left and 2 can fight. And the barbarian will take 1 and the dwarf will take 1. So we're in a hallway now, fighting 2 goblins, with 2 wanting to get into the fray or maybe run away, you never know. So let's start off with the barbarian. He has the first player token anyway, so it's always a good start with him. And he does charge in. So it's going to be a D10 versus a D6. Hopefully, I'm going to run this goblin down. It's a draw. So yeah, the goblin steps to one side and the barbarian goes charging past. Okay, come on dwarf. What can you do? Shame up this barbarian. And yes indeed, we've hit the goblin. Our weapon is much more powerful than its scrawny body. but he does get a defense of 2. So as long as I don't roll 1 or a 2, hey, Goblin goes splat. As you know, gotta roll a d6, and we don't get experience. By the way, if you would have rolled a 1, an extra goblin would have turned up to help its friends, hence the wave 1 rule. Right, combat round is over. What happens is there's a space available, so a goblin steps in, and the dwarf will take it. Oh, the barbarian could take it. No, the dwarf will take it. Like I said, the first player token gets a choice. And so, new round of combat. So let's start with the barbarian. Barbarian is not doing too well. Okay. So the goblin gets the blow in. Here we go. Thankfully, it's just a scar. Come on, dwarf. You seem to be the one that's doing the best at the moment. He says it. And yes, indeed. Hi there, too. Ah, God. It's all hacking off the arm of a goblin, but it's still fighting. New round of combat. Barbarian, who's not having a good day today. He's not having a good day today. Oh, come on. Let's shame it up. Let's use this token to re-roll. Oh, dear. He's swinging wildly. Dearie me. Oh, God. Let's see what the damage is. Hopefully none. Against the barbarian. 7 beats of 4. I'm afraid he takes a wound from the goblin. Come on, dwarf. Yes. Yes. 5+ experience. Yes, indeed. Combat round is over. We have space. Another goblin charges in. Over to the barbarian now. Come on, my friend. Oh, we do have a sword on a 1. Yes, indeed. Higher 2. It's a 3. Yes, the goblin is killed at last. Thank you, barbarian. And you get loot. So you get experience and a piece of gold. Congratulations. So the barbarian now turns around and looks at the dwarf, as hopefully he's going to finish off his fight. Indeed, the hammer blow hits the goblin, and I'm afraid bounces off some kind of shoulder armour. Right. So we're on to a new combat phase now, and let's be cheeky. The barbarian is going to step into the fight and take the goblin, and like I said, the player who was the dwarf might say no, but like I said, the first player token, if you're playing this as a multiplayer game, gets the last say in the matter. So as the dwarf is fighting the goblin, the barbarian that's killed his goblin is going to turn around and attack. And luckily, whoa. Oh, it's a headbutt. Hold on now. Let's see what happens. So, do we kill this goblin first? And the answer is yes, we do. Okay, so we never got a chance to do the headbutt. Creature's so small though. So the goblin has been killed, and experience? No. So all the goblins are now dead. And we look at this now and say to ourselves, right, the combat is over, we're in a hallway. Barbarian needs to use his bandage, and we're going to roll to see. On a 4, there we go. So the barbarian has a torch, turn that over, and provisions, which help with tiredness, and you have provisions as well. So right now, we are kind of struggling. Let's just push on a little bit further and see if we can get to the halfway mark of our dungeon. Yes, let's go. Ah, a strange flickering green light seems to pulse from the very walls themselves. Your head starts to ache, your teeth start to hum. Reward and event. Right, let's see what we got. Right. We have a threat rolled and a reward. But we have a clue. And using a clue that we found from the Goblin Cave walls, we can re-roll an omen die. And we're definitely going to re-roll the threat. Come on. Yes. So we have this. So in this example, do we take the reward card and then pass the token from the Barbarian to the Dwarf? Or do we pass the token to the Dwarf and then we turn this reward over? Now the reward sometimes is given to the holder of the token. So the Barbarian, fingers crossed, may get the reward himself. So we are going to find out the joy of... Oh. To one side is a pile of dirty rags. Approaching with caution, you poke the pile with your weapons. Looking closer, you find... all take 2 gold. So everybody shares a little bit of gold from the hidden box. That's where's the shaky camera. There we go. So excited grabbing my gold coins there. And now we pass that token over to the dwarf. So leaving the chamber of power. Oh, this is perfect. A draft touches your skin. It looks like there's a possible way out of here. So what this card means, it's like the halfway dungeon card. And if you're doing really, really poorly, at this point, you can actually end the game and walk away. But because of the flee word at the bottom, there's going to be a loss of experience of something. So if we'd done really, really bad and we were all badly beaten up with no bandages and we thought, my God, we're not going to survive this, we could step away, lose some of our experience, and obviously we're never going to rescue the farmer's daughter, which is not the way that heroes act. And this is the halfway in the game, which I think is quite a perfect moment to end. But before we do of part 1, we do need to see if there is a threat in this area and danger. Here we go. Double torches. This is wonderful. As you know, we pass the token, it stays with the dwarf, and there is no threat, there is no danger, we are safe. So that is a very good result. So let me look at my little phone. We're coming up to 48 minutes now. I think this is really perfect. So I'm going to end part 1 here, upload the file to my computer, make some space, and have a cup of tea, and come down and make part 2. So very briefly, what has happened? The Barbarian and the Dwarf has gone to rescue the farmer's daughter from the Orcs and Goblins that have been raiding the village. We entered and we've had a cave in, we found a clue, we've got a torch, and we've been finding all kinds of potions. We did get a hidden box, and there's been a goblins, ankle biters, which are like Gretchins and those little creatures, and orcs. So there's a little bit of a story at the side of the board now, if anyone wants to find out what's been going on. We've had some heroic actions, which have been quite good. And we really haven't used much of our tokens. But we have had some wounds, which we had to use our limited bandages to. As you know, we are now halfway in the dungeon. We are just generally fighting orcs and goblins today, but as you see, combat can be very swingy, and we have to be very careful with the easiest of creatures can easily harm us. But we're doing okay. I will say this though, the shield with the dwarf has really helped out, and the Barbarian has had some really bad luck when it comes to charging into combat. They both have free experience, and they both have a little bit of gold to spend afterwards to replenish their stock. I hope that has come across okay for your 55-minute type of view. And like I said, this isn't a slick video, I'm afraid. This isn't one of these massive companies with incredible studios and lightning, not lightning. But I hope you get a really good gist of when you are playing the game. There is no complicated rule book. Everything is in front of you. Once you've played once or twice, it's a very easy game for yourself. It's a super game to teach others, really. They just need to know what dice they're rolling. Nothing complicated about choosing a mission. I just made one up on the fly, took a few cards out of the threat deck, and added a few cards at the back of the dungeon to represent finding the farmer's daughter. And we were up and playing in no time at all. I know off camera you never saw setup. Shuffling cards was the longest part, and just a quick game to put on the table, a quick game to just fight monsters without tiles, miniatures, and a huge box. So anyway, I'm going to have a cup of tea and a ginger nut, and maybe come back and watch part 2 and we see how our heroes fare. So anyway, brave adventurers, thank you for tuning in and take care. Maybe see you in part 2.